John out here with you. It is Thursday, November 5th. We're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to give you a quick look at Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning on the PlayStation 4 and multi-platform. Geez, it's going to be really hard to say as we go along. Now, a little bit of the history lesson. I want to give credit where credit is due. Some of this information is taken from Inverse.com and the article writer Corey Plant. I want to give you a little bit of history here. So the initial release of Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning was a 2012 action role-playing game, kind of like a single-player action role-playing game, like Final Fantasy XII or the remake Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age. That's a fucking remake. So this was similar to Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, Skyrim, stuff like that, but a single-player game. Now this was a big deal because back then, the release on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, originally developed by Big Huge Games and 38 Studios, this came out February 7, 2012 in the initial release, and it was important, as I mentioned, because just a few short months prior, you had Skyrim. So being able to have this game sell copies, that's going to be a big damn deal. Now there was a lot of big names brought into it, whether it be Dungeons & Dragons, R.A. Salvatore, Spawn creator Todd McFarlane, previous employee and worker on Ken Rolston for Elder Scrolls Morrowind and Oblivion. A lot of big expectations. Who was brought in to fund all of this stuff? And I kid you not, famous Boston Red Sox pitcher Bloody Sock Curt Schilling. This was a lot of money that Schilling put into the game that he really didn't put a penny back into it to get to himself, and they pretty much lost it all when they made this game. Supposedly, this game sold about 1.7 million copies. In its initial release, it needed to sell about 3.8 million in order for them to even break even or start making money. And the governor of Rhode Island pretty much called this the most massive failure of all time, as it was brought in to stimulate jobs in the Rhode Island economy. That did not end up happening. So all of these guys were brought in to make this game, but why did it fail so badly? And you're talking about, yeah, that's a lot of copies, between 1.5 million, but when you're putting in as much money as you did, it doesn't really work that way. So, a lot of history, a lot of guys that are brought in there, they wanted to make whimsical areas. This was supposedly going to be a massively multiplayer online RPG. Electronic Arts came into the act and said, we need to dumb this down and make this a single-player experience. And bring in these worlds, but bring in it as a single-player experience. And that's what they did. So they had a lot of all of that. In exchange for $75 million in bonds, again, to stimulate the economy in Providence, Rhode Island, it didn't really work out too much. Now, this is a very long game. Many people can tell you it takes about 200 hours to play. They have a few people that I've been told about 635 hours complete game time if you want to go all the way and do every single quest in this game. But to me, you can finish the story in about 30 hours if you want to go do all that. If you want to do a little bit of story and a little bit of side quests, that's about 70 hours to you. But the big draw of this game, to me, in the sense of especially when I played it in its initial release, was the combat system. The combat system had a lot of combos. It had a lot of stuff that was weighty. It felt pretty good. It felt like an action RPG. And in the 2012 release, when I played this on the PlayStation 3, even though it was just 720p at the time, I was really kind of impressed with the amount of combos and the different kind of things you could do. See, the class system in this game was completely customizable. Whether you wanted to have warrior skills, archer skills, or mage skills, or combine two of the three classes, or have all of the three classes combined, or just have a mastery in one, you could do that any time by just visiting a Fate Weaver. They go ahead and change your skills, and then you can just branch out and always enjoy yourself. You can figure out how to mix potions, just like that in Skyrim and Oblivion games and things like that. Elder Scrolls games, you can try to do all of that. You can mix everything else that you do, all the quest lines, all that stuff kind of feels the same. So you would feel right at home. But to me, when you release this game just 3 months after Skyrim, you kind of have to think there's going to be some issues. There's going to be a little bit of fatigue, even though this game sold about 1.5 million copies in its initial release. There's going to be some issues. But to me, when I look at it, when I played this game initially, like I said, when it came out on February 7, 2012, what pissed me off about it, even though I had about 30 hours in at the time, was there were so many game-breaking glitches inside Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and now Re-Reckoning in the re-release, that I couldn't play it anymore. Physically, I couldn't play it anymore because I would quick travel across the map, right? So I'm starting to walk on land, I go into water, all of a sudden I get into a walking animation where it completely stops, and I have to keep double tapping the circle button to roll in order to get anywhere. Yes, I cannot walk or run. My walk cycle is completely broken. And back at the time, it was totally fucked, because if you had it on the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3, there was built-in copy protection, so you could not change your files around. God forbid, if something happened where the game notoriously fucked up and you couldn't proceed, you were screwed. If you didn't have a save file, if your autosaves got messed up or anything else got messed up, you were SOL, shit out of luck. And now, going into this, just about 3 months ago in a September release of Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, August, September release, somewhere around there when this game came out. Some of the glitches, the game-breaking glitches, are gone, but there's so many glitches that still remain. Just like that opening release where I just seen like this warping teleportation kind of thing, and I had to just reload my game and hope it didn't happen again, only 5 or 6 minutes for it to happen again later. There's just certain spells that you use, especially as I'm using a full-on mage here with all the skills, all the top tier skills that I have at the moment, that when you cast like a meteor spell, when you have fire and rocks, something else comes down there, the game just fucks up, or the NPCs just disappear, or the quest lines can't be completed. Some of the quest lines that were initially not able to be completed in the initial release of the game still can't be completed in this game. What did they change? When I talk about remasters, remakes, things like that, Last of Us Remastered, okay? I shat on Last of Us 2 for every single reason in the book, as it needed to be. Last of Us Remastered was not just a 1080p remaster. It wasn't just bringing in all of the DLC. It wasn't just bringing in all of the multiplayer modes. It was pretty much making everything, faster loading, all that, everything optimized for the PlayStation 4 coming from the PlayStation 3. You would think, coming from the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, as the original Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning did, that they could kind of optimize some of that stuff for the Xbox One, the S, the PS4, the PS4 Pro, or the Xbox One X. No, fuck that. We're just going to pretty much make the same game. Oh, but we're not going to charge you $60. We're just going to make it $40. If you had a lot of qualms and complaints of the initial release, there isn't anything else here that's going to change your mind. This game, honestly, even though going from 720p to 1080, depending on what you played it on, this game still looks the same. Honestly, from the initial release, which looked pretty damn good at the time, going to it now, this game just looks pretty goddamn ugly. So, is the gameplay loop and everything else addictive enough for you to want to still play this game? As I said, I'm about 55 hours in, and I don't know if I'm going to go back to it, so that's why it's just a quick look here. Obviously, I want to clean everything else off my hard drive and get some of his videos out before the PS5 comes out next week, but is this a game that you want to play in the future, or is this a game that you should go out and get right now? This game's been out for a few months already. I mean, maybe if you're lucky enough, you could see it $20 to $25 used, although I'm not sure how many copies of this game was released. Although there will be, some other patches that still get released that maybe could change some of these things. Even though the game also includes all the DLC from the initial release, and there's more DLC coming, I don't know still if that's enough for $40. Maybe $20, $25 used, but at the same point, all of this stuff is just so goddamn repetitive that it's not fun. A lot of the stuff is fetch quests. A lot of the stuff of the story honestly doesn't really matter. It's a lot of, innuendo and new words and things like that. When I talk about like Death Stranding and Hideo Kojima and some of these other things, all these euphemisms that you have to learn, there's a lot of that stuff in this game, and quite frankly, it's just boring. It doesn't keep your interest as far as the story. And when the quests and everything else is just repetitive and the gameplay loop is repetitive, it doesn't make for the greatest game at all. So to me, if I gave the initial release probably about a 7.5, because I thought it was good for its time, even though I have a lot of the same qualms with the gameplay loop being repetitive and all of that. If I had to score this game, I mean, honestly, it's been really untouched, with the exception of some of the game breaking glitches being fixed, but still a lot of glitches in the game. I couldn't really give it more than a 3 or 4. I really can't, because it doesn't seem like they've done a lot of work to it. Even though when you look at some of these videos and you have people comment on Facebook and Twitter and say, geez, what did you guys change? Yeah, you maybe took out some of the game breaking glitches, but it's not suffice it to say that you're going to run into some other ones. So keep an eye out. Maybe you'll find something down the line, or maybe this game will come free and you can get a chance to play it and all of that, but who knows? THQ Nordic and the issue with Kurt Schilling and big huge games and all of that stuff before. Now THQ Nordic has it. Will they do Kingdoms of Amalur Copernicus? Will they turn this into a MMORPG instead of a single player one? That remains to be seen, and whether or not time will tell of how many copies this game is sold. But at this point, I think a lot of people have probably forgotten about it, and it's relatively obscure. As always, though, let me know what you think about it. I want to get another NHL video out here and get some other things figured out. I got a few rants to do on that game, so I'll check back in with you guys in a little while, at least before next week, get all this stuff cleared up, and we'll get some PS5 information in there, and I'll let you know what I know about it and what you should look out for. Peace, guys. Thank you for checking out the video.